For years, I kept asking the same question. Why does life feel like it's never quite enough? I chased answers in books, in silence, in everything, because sitting with that ache felt unbearable. Then I came across a single line from the Buddha that didn't answer the question at all. It did something better. It dissolved the need to ask. Today, that line is for you. Late in the winter season, across the Indian landscape a dry wind was still blowing. The trees stood bare, the earth hard beneath the cold, and only the color of the sky shifted, growing just a little paler each day. On one such evening, in the grove surrounding Jetavana Monastery, a man sat alone. The other disciples had finished their daily practice and gone to rest. Only he remained, perfectly still. He wasn't meditating. He wasn't asleep. He simply sat, knees pulled to his chest, eyes cast down at the ground, lips pressed tightly together. The wind moved through the leaves with a soft, rustling sound, and inside that sound he stayed, unmoving, for a very long time. A monk passing by on his way to fetch water slowed his steps, glanced over, then quietly walked on. An old dog that sometimes wandered the grove came and lay down a few feet away, resting its gray muzzle on the dirt, asking nothing. His name was Malankiyaputta. What the poisoned arrow parable is really pointing to is this. Look at what is piercing you right now. But it's not quite as simple as stop overthinking. Let's sit with it a little more carefully. First, let's look at how suffering actually works. What was Malankiyaputta truly afraid of? He called it the anxiety of walking without answers. But here's a question worth pausing on. Was he suffering because there were no answers? Or because he believed there had to be? A long winter is hard, but the winter itself isn't what creates the suffering. It's the chain of thoughts that forms around it. Spring should be here by now. Why hasn't it come? What if winter never ends? That chain of expectation is what builds the suffering up. The fact of winter doesn't change, but the moment you label it as something that shouldn't be, the pain deepens. The Buddha taught what is called impermanence, the truth that everything is always changing. This is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean learn to accept that things change. That misses the point entirely. Change itself is not painful. What's painful is the wish that things would stay the same, the grip we place on something, insisting it remain fixed. We don't suffer because winter exists. We suffer because some part of us has decided winter should already be over. And here's something that might feel a little unsettling. We often say, I am suffering, my grief, my pain. But Buddhism asks, what exactly is this I? According to the Buddha, there is no fixed, permanent self. What we call me is more like a river than a stone, a continuous flow of body, feeling, perception, thought, and awareness, all arising together under a particular set of conditions, taking shape as this person, in this moment. Malankyaputta's anxiety wasn't something he was born with and had always carried. It arose from a specific combination, the belief that answers were necessary before he could move forward, the attachment to being the one asking the right questions, the accumulated fatigue of years of practice. Those conditions came together and something we might call his suffering appeared. Suffering isn't a possession. It's a phenomenon, something that appears when certain conditions align, which means when conditions shift, its shape can shift too. Not because you tried harder, but because nothing about it was ever permanent to begin with. And what the Buddha was pointing to with the poisoned arrow wasn't study this as a philosophy. It was more urgent than that. Knowing the correct answer about the edge of the universe won't remove a single drop of your present pain. But if you can see, even slightly, what you're gripping, what you've decided must be a certain way, where you've placed a should onto something that simply is, that seeing becomes the first movement toward pulling out the arrow. That is where Buddhism begins. Think of a monk who spent 40 years trying to understand the nature of mind before he would allow himself to rest. On his deathbed, a young novice asked him if he had finally found his answer. He smiled and said, I stopped asking, and the question dissolved. He hadn't found the answer. He had simply released his grip on needing one. Let's bring this closer, into the life most of us. There's just one small thing I'd like to invite you to try today. It's this. Set the question to one side, just for a moment. That might sound vague, so let me make it concrete. Tonight, If there's something turning over and over in your mind, grab a piece of paper or open the Notes app on your phone. Write down what you're circling around. It could be, why won't that person understand me? Or when will things finally get easier? Or what's going to happen from here? It doesn't matter what it is. Write it down and then close the note. Now, instead of looking outward for the answer, turn toward your body and simply ask, where does it hurt right now? Is there tension in your shoulders? Is your breathing shallow? Is there a heaviness in your chest or your stomach? Does your head ache? Just ask your body. It will answer honestly. Your body isn't telling you the answer to your big question. It's showing you where the arrow is, where the suffering is actually living right now. That's where to begin. Just notice it quietly. The Buddha's disciples practiced something called right mindfulness, a continuous gentle awareness of this present moment. It doesn't have to be a formal practice. It can be as simple as this. When you lie down tonight, before sleep, take a moment to feel how your body actually is. Not to fix it, not to judge it, just to feel it, to notice. Somewhere in that noticing, the location of the arrow often becomes a little clearer. Once I have the answer, I'll be okay. That's exactly what Malunkyaputta carried with him that night under the trees. And the Buddha's response wasn't to give him the answer. It was to say, while you wait for it, the arrow remains. Tonight, just for a moment, let the searching rest and turn toward what your body already knows. A monk I once heard about kept a worn notebook by his bed for 30 years, not filled with insights or revelations, but with a single repeated entry, night after night. Tight chest, right shoulder, jaw clenched. He said it taught him more about his suffering than any text he ever studied. Not because the notebook held answers, but because the act of writing it down was itself a kind of coming home. Your note on your phone can do the same quiet work. What is the big question you've been carrying, the one you're still searching for an answer to? And if the answer finally came, would the pain you feel right now actually disappear? There's no rush, no need to answer immediately. Just let yourself sit with that for a moment. A monk once spent 40 years seeking the answer to why his mother had died so young, until one morning he simply forgot to ask, and found himself laughing at a sparrow on the windowsill. The question had not been answered. It had just quietly set down its luggage and walked away. The truth of impermanence we touched on today. We explored it through another lens in an earlier teaching, watching the natural world reveal what the Buddha described so quietly. You'll find a link in the description below. There are seasons in every life that feel like a winter with no end in sight, no clear direction, no idea why it hurts the way it does, no sense of what you're walking toward. Those nights exist for all of us. Malunkyaputta had been carrying enormous questions. And honestly, that wasn't a shallow thing. It came from something real in him. We all want to know why. Why does this hurt so much? Why me of all people? Why won't it just end? That why comes from one of the most essentially human parts of us. But I don't think the Buddha was telling him to abandon those questions. What I believe he was saying was this: see the arrow first. The big questions will still be there after it's removed. You can go on asking them, but if the arrow stays in while you search for answers, no answer will ever reach you. Not really, not in the way that matters. I can't promise you that spring is coming. I wish I could. But I can say this: there's a difference between someone who spends all of winter asking, why isn't it spring yet, with their eyes closed, and someone who feels the cold, feels the stillness, feels the hard ground beneath them, exactly as it is. When the first breath of spring finally comes, those two people will receive it differently. One of them has been present for the whole of winter. Their body knows what the cold actually felt like. And somehow that makes the warmth mean something more. Thank you for being here today, and for listening all the way through. Whatever winter you're in, I hope it moves at its own pace, gently, and in its own time. There is a monk I once read about, who spent 3 winters in a mountain monastery so cold that the ink froze in its well each morning. He did not write about warmth. He wrote about the exact weight of the blanket, the particular sound the floorboards made before dawn, the way his own breath looked rising in the dark. When he finally descended into the valley, he said he had nothing new to report, only that he had not missed a single day of the cold. That somehow was the whole of it. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.